The Hawk, the Hound, and the Butterfly, Chapter 11, Apollo, Part 1. Apollo balanced on a branch high in the trees, an arrow nocked in his bow at the ready, waiting for the slightest of movements. Through the red leaves of the trees, Ares hid, crouched on a low branch, gripping his spear. To his right was Athena, hidden beneath a bush, its thorns sharper than her plan was. Apollo shook his head. They were wasting time. The Techans could be torturing Artemis right this second, torturing her for information about military forces and Arcadian secrets that she had no idea about, but that wouldn't stop them punishing her. And where were her rescuers? Sitting in trees waiting for someone that may never turn up. Trying to convince Athena otherwise was like trying to tell the sun to stop rising. She was dead set in her ways, and Apollo either had to go with her way or go home. And Apollo had no home to go back to, not without Artemis. A faint sound of voices came through the trees. Apollo looked down at Athena. Her eyes were already on him. She flicked her eyes to the left. Apollo followed them. The leaves on the trees there were shaking. Apollo could feel the vibrations in the trees coming up through his feet. He guessed there wouldn't be many, a small patrol party, maybe 3 or 4 men. Apollo drew back on the string of his bow. His arms started to shake already. All the salves and ointments in Arcus couldn't have ever fully healed his shoulder. He took a deep breath and stretched out his fingers that were gripped around the bow, one at a time. The pain subsided. Sweat dripped down Apollo's forehead and into his eye. He tried to blink it away while still watching the trees. He wiped his face across the hand that drew the string back. A figure emerged through the trees. Apollo let fly his arrow. He nocked another. A man wearing a helm and a cloth shirt with a faded spiked mace on it stumbled out into the clearing. He howled in pain as he jerked the arrow out of his stomach. Apollo shot another arrow at the man. It whizzed past him as he turned. The man held up something and pointed it at Apollo. It took Apollo far too long to realize what it was. A hand cannon, the weapon the Techans had created and used to successfully wipe out entire armies. Apollo jumped as a hot piece of lead zipped past, blowing the bark off the tree trunk where he had just been. Apollo landed on his injured arm and let out an agonizing groan. 3 more Techans came running into the clearing, brandishing rusted small swords. Apollo rolled onto his side and reached for his bow. Metal clashed above him. He turned back to see Athena standing over him with her shield. She pushed the attacker back and slashed at him with her sword. It sliced clean across his torso. Blood melted down his body and pooled at his feet. The attacker's eyes turned dark as the light left them. The body fell into a heap on the ground. Apollo stared at the body. He usually didn't get this close, but it wasn't over yet. Apollo shook his head and grabbed his bow, nocking another arrow. One of the attackers ran towards Ares. Ares flung his spear at the man. It went through his body, the force pushing him back and pinning him against a tree. He spat out blood before collapsing forward over the spear. Apollo turned around, looking for the other attacker. There were already 3 bodies on the ground in the clearing, but Apollo was sure that there was a 4th attacker. Maybe he had hit his head when he fell from the tree. The only one of the men that was still alive, just barely, was the first man Apollo had shot, who was on his knees, fumbling, trying to reload his hand cannon. One of the major flaws with the Tekken hand cannon was that they only shot 3 times before needing to be reloaded, which was a long enough process for someone with a sword to stab you, or a bow and arrow to shoot you. This was a major reason Arcadia never saw fit to replicate the weapon, apart from it being considered barbaric. Apollo stepped up in front of the man and pulled an arrow on him. The man shakily held up his hand cannon, pointing it at Apollo's face. It weighed heavy in his hands. Blood seeped from the wound in his stomach that Apollo had made. Apollo took his arrow and held up his bow in a truce. Slowly, Apollo placed them on the ground. He stepped closer to the man. The man still pointed the hand cannon at Apollo, but he hadn't set it off. Perhaps it wasn't even reloaded. Apollo was right in front of the man now. He reached out and slapped the hand cannon out of the man's hands. He let out a squeal. Apollo pulled the man's rusted Tekken helm off of his head. The Tekken was no man. Still fresh-faced with soft features. Just a boy, probably a year or two younger than Apollo. He was well fed, and judging by the fact he owned a hand cannon, was probably the son of a wealthy high-ranking Tekken. Apollo knelt beside the boy. His lips were already turning blue, and his face was pale, and judging by the smell, his bodily functions were failing. "Tell me," Apollo said in a soft, dreamlike voice, "what was this tower for?" The boy stared up at Apollo. His brown eyes were glassy and filling with tears. Apollo put his hand on the boy's shoulder. The boy shuddered. "Please, Apollo, behind!" Ares shouted. Apollo turned. A Tekken charged towards him, his sword raised above his head. Apollo reached for his bow that lay on the ground. His fingers swatted at the string. The Tekken froze suddenly. His sword dropped from his hands. His eyes rolled up into his head, and he fell forward, hitting the ground with a thud. A sword lodged in his back.